Welcome back to Late to the Know-How. I'm Simon and this is session 1. Before we begin, I'd like to just go over some housekeeping. The first thing is the video cameras that I use, they're a bit dodgy, so the autofocus goes in and out. So I apologise for any weirdness you might be experiencing there. The second thing is my voice was a bit muddy, so I've tweaked things. So hopefully that's not as bad. Hopefully it's a bit clearer for you. The tools and the books that I use, I've bought myself. I don't have any sponsorship with anyone. And I'll put links in the description of where you can get those books and things if you're interested in getting them. The little astronomy picture that is at the front, at the start, I should say, that's just taken with my own little smart telescope. And any of the music that you hear is generally me playing around with some modular ambient sort of stuff. All right. Before we begin on the story itself, I'll just show you the video of the 3D printer printing the 3 main minis and me painting them up, and some little, fancy little snaps at the end just so that you can see what they look like. All right, let's get on to that and then we'll start the journey. Okay, we've printed the minis and we've just given them a white prime, and they're not, we haven't gone too overboard, but we've got Sailorthil, this is our paladin character. We've got Walby, he's our cleric, and then we've got our main character, this is Lena, and she's our spell sword, and we're just going to give them a quick paint job. We're going to be using just speed paints, contrast paints. They're quick and fast and they come out pretty good, and we just got a basic theme for them, so we're going to be doing like their cloaks and stuff in this kind of green for all of them. And we'll just we'll paint up the rest of their stuff with some different colors and things. Yeah, well, let's go. I'll just do a fast forward with all this sort of stuff so you're not bored out of your brain. All right, let's go. Alrighty, let's get on with it. So what I did was I went through the characters and I've converted them across to the Statblock format. So we've got our main character, Lena. We've got our healer character, Wolby. And we've got our tank character, Sailorthal. Now with these guys, I went over their stat blocks and I gave them a little bit of a backstory, which I've written down into a journal. So I've started journaling stuff into this book here. It has a bit of an issue, that cover. I don't know what's going on, but that cover has issues with the Arena camera, so I'm not going to flash the cover on it. But basically, it's just it's just a journal. And so what I did was I went through what we did last time and just fleshed out the characters a bit more. So with Lena, what I did, I kept all her characteristic stuff, but I've just got her as being a local wood elf to the forest. And she developed like arcane abilities when she was young, and so was taken to the Druidic Grove and sort of taught how to use her skills and stuff. And at the same time, she learned how to fight with a sword. And from that point of view, she's essentially a fighter that can use some magic. With Warby, I made him, like I rolled using some random tables. I made him an orphan of the community, and he was raised by the druids, and he's basically found a calling as being part of the Druidic Grove, to the Gatherer. And he grew up around Lena, and so they're basically been friends since childhood. Sailorthal, she's a relative newcomer to the Druidic Grove. She's an Aasimar, and essentially her background was that she followed the advice of an old tarot card reader who was a bit of a charlatan, and she spent quite a fair bit of time wandering around, getting into all sorts of mischief and stuff like that. Not bad herself, but just getting used by other people. And then after a year or so of wandering around the area, came across the Druidic Grove, was helped by the druids, and has essentially become a very strong, got a very strong devotion to the Gatherer now. They really helped her get out of trouble and gave her a purpose. And so she knows Lena and Warby through the school, through the Druidic school. And then what I did was I rolled on some tables using our random table book and this Wondrous Expeditions book with forests and this Spectacular Settlements book by Nord, to basically generate our starting community. And the starting community essentially consists of a place called Kilvington, which has been around for about 70 or so years. It started as a trading post by some traders who were harvesting wood and other things from the forest. And then as it got a little bit bigger, a bit of a community built up around that. And then the druids came in. Perhaps the druids were already there, but they decided to become part of the community and start a school of some sort. Now, as part of the generating Kilvington, using this Spectacular Settlements book here, it lets you generate things like not only how big the community is, but what sort of hardships that they went through and what the population's like and stuff like that. And basically what I rolled was that the community is now currently a little bit dilapidated. And with that dilapidation is the result of a couple of hardships that the community has gone through. And so I went through the hardships table and rolled some hardships and found that one of them was a harsh weather hardship and the other one was a community conflict hardship. And so what I decided to do was the community conflict hardship happened when the community was first started. And I determined that, or worked out just that the villagers and the traders that were working in the area had a fight essentially over who was going to run the place. And I then thought, well, let's have it so that the druids actually take over and they run the place. They set up their school, they administer the place, and they generally keep, harmony between the villagers and the forest and the traders. And that way, there's no dilapidation of the forest. It's all looked after. It's all been maintained and cared for. And then the other conflict, hardship, was harsh weather. And I rolled a tornado for that. And I thought, well, what can we use to make that the starting point? Let's use that as our starting point for our characters. So I basically thought, well, maybe the past few years, there's been some really weird storm cells come through the area. That's kind of destroyed a bit of the forest, and so the traders and the foresters have left, and the village or community itself is basically just running on bare threads. The druid school is still there, and essentially all essential services are provided by the villagers, who are in fact the druids now. And so a recent event has been that this strange tornado has come through, and so the druid enclave has got together and decided, well, we need to maybe send out some runners to look around, investigate the area, and see what's going on, because this is very strange and unusual weather, and it could be caused by something. So yeah, I've gone through, and we'll use that as our starting point. So what we'll do is we'll have our 3 characters meet up with one of the druidic leaders, and there's a bunch of random tables that we can roll on to determine NPC names and all jobs and stuff like that. Alrighty, when I was looking through my minis, I found this guy. And what I'll do is I'll just use him as our druidic leader. And I'll just roll a couple of names for him, a first name and a last name, and then we'll go from there. So let's just pick a name. One. So Ordway. One again. Langley. Ordway Langley is his name. How's that? All right, let's get on with Ordway. Now, before we go on with the story, I thought I'd go over the Oracle system that I'm going to be using. Now, it's just a very simple system. You ask a question, you roll the dice, you get a yes, no, or variation kind of response. And using that response, you can then create your story. Now, the Oracle system also has a plausibility modifier, which essentially means that you roll 2 dice, and whichever, if it's implausible or plausible, you just take that roll. It also uses a complication chain. Instead of using a chaos factor that you would decide yourself, like in Mythic GME, this just uses a series of dice that you roll on and reduce down in size until you get to the very end. And at that point, that's when the complication occurs, and there's a total random shift in the scene or in the adventure. Now I'm using a 2-chain complication system, a minor one that just affects what's happening in the now to the characters that might be part of the scene or part of their combat or conversation. And then I'm using a major complication, which is a world-changing event complication. And hopefully that'll give us some twists in the background about what's affecting the characters in the foreground. Now the Oracle also uses an inspiration, well, a couple of inspiration tables, and this is what you use to roll on to help you decide about actions and things like that. So for our characters and our druidic leader, we're going to just use a roll on the inspiration table just to see what he comes up with in terms of what he's going to get the characters to do. So they've met up at the school or at his place of business or his residence. He's explained to them in the past, 5 to 10 years, the weather around here has gotten really strange. Storms have gotten worse and worse. And then just recently, we've had that big tornado come through the forest. And he explains, we've never had that kind of weather system in the area. The history shows us that kind of weather system never occurs here. So he basically is scared about what is going on and he wants to find out. So he's going to get the characters to do his running around as characters and initiates should. So what we'll do is we'll roll on the inspiration table and see what he comes up with. Alrighty, let's roll our verb. Collect. Let's roll our noun. Community. And let's roll the adjective. Simple. Alrighty, so we've got collect, community, and simple. So what this says to me is that it's a fairly straightforward request that Ordway has of the characters. He basically wants to go to the nearest community or a various number of communities perhaps, and try to collect any information they can find about what's going on. And he wants it to be done simply. He doesn't need any sort of complex political intrigues or anything like that. Basically, they're just going to the next bunch of communities, the nearby communities, a broader area surrounding the forest, and just collect information, as much information as they can. Yeah, let's go with that. That sounds pretty easy. It's not too taxing. It's basically just an information gathering adventure at this particular point in time. Alrighty, so the characters have their first quest. And as part of this first quest is going to be a hex crawl to the next village. So what I've done is I've printed some hex tiles and painted them. This is the first one. It's terrible. So I reprinted it and painted it a little bit better. And we'll be using those for a hex crawl. And I'll create a bunch of hex crawl rules that we'll use so that we can sort of move around the wilderness and the terrain. But yeah, I think what we might do is we might call this session done. We've added a few extra things to our characters. We've generated their backstory and their current quest. And I'm going to try and not have the episodes go for too long because I'm not sure exactly how often I'll be able to update. I'm hoping sort of 1 to 2 weeks between each sort of session, and I kind of want to keep them a little bit compact so there won't be too much going on in each one, and that way hopefully you won't get too bored just watching me dribble on. Yeah, so this is where we'll call it. I think we've got our characters, they've got their first quest, they're about to head off. All right, thank you for joining.